Hi, everyone. How's it going? I was going to take some time today to chat about doing some personalization with Marketo. The ask that sort of came to me was to kind of go beyond using things like person tokens to just put someone's first name in an email. So a little bit about me first. I've been using Marketo for what feels like forever in a bunch of different roles, from sort of just running regular email campaigns out of it to doing a little bit more complex stuff around student acquisition over sort of creating a student lifecycle and bringing people to the tool there. More recently, I am the digital marketing manager at Expert 360, so I'm looking after everything on our website, obviously everything we do with Marketo and everything we do with our advertising as well, which has been a pretty neat space to be able to have ownership of the whole digital set and being able to kind of integrate campaigns across the different tools in that way. And it's also Expert 360 is a freelancing marketplace, so there's this aspect of managing two sides of a marketplace coming together to interact on your platform rather than selling an individual product to a group, which has been cool. But today, we're here to talk about personalizing. So how I sort of started thinking about this presentation was, let's look up like a definition of what personalized might mean. In the dictionary, we kind of have some pretty regular terms, like to sort of mark it with your initials or some sort of monogram is to personalize something, to make something personal by applying that sort of statement to yourself or take it personally is another definition. We don't kind of want that one. That one's kind of crummy. But to ascribe personal qualities to or to personify, I think is quite interesting here. And I tried to take an angle of how can we make our marketing feel more human, like maybe it has a personality to it beyond something that seems more like a corporate communication from a sort of bland brand that's not really that exciting to be kind of connected to. And obviously, you know, the more recent definition is to tailor something to someone's needs and preferences based on either, you know, them telling you something or what you inferred about them based on the information you got about them. So a lot of that is kind of more what we talk about in personalized marketing, but I think it's useful to hold those three definitions. So why might you choose to do something like this over sending one message to everyone you have in the database? Obviously, there's this aspect of trying to make people feel seen and understood a little bit more than you might otherwise do with a generic message. There's an aspect of wanting to start to feel, for your customer at least, that you're talking to them individually to begin some sort of two-way dialogue, and that might be a nice handover to being able to implement things like chatbots or things like more like social listening tools and responses there. Or you can look at, you know, providing more value through personalization. So what you deliver through your marketing has some value to the customer, whether it's making it easier to buy your complex product or making people more confident in the decisions that they're making. There's, you know, additional value you can provide by tailoring that experience to the individual. I wanted to take a moment to kind of talk about what personalization is not, from my point of view. We sort of, I think the term gets conflated a little bit in a lot of sort of vendor communications about what personalization is. Is it super advanced micro-targeting down to the individual level? Is it you know, other sort of like aspects there? I think what it's really not is segmentation or having personas. I don't think it's also targeting. So if we look at targeting as trying to find out what segments you want to go after in your business and the obviously segmentation exercise of coming up with those segments in the first place, as well as the kind of positioning work that you do in marketing to tailor a message to those segments. I don't think any of that is personalization yet. That's just doing targeted marketing, right? It's knowing that there's a certain segment that are going to buy your product, and maybe there are multiple segments that will have different messages, but that's kind of beyond, or not beyond, but that's kind of a prerequisite to be able to do good personalization. I think you should have an understanding of what those personas are and how you would start to construct those personas in the system to be able to deliver those targeted messages and then personalize on top of that. So how might we do some of this sort of stuff? obviously using what we know or what we can learn to kind of spark joy is a kind of good objective here. What I mean by that is using some combination of what they've told you. So obviously we all have lead gen forms on our site and various forms, or sign up forms for an online tool. We collect some data about our users through all those means. We can also use what they've done. So obviously, Marketo being this tool to receive a whole lot of web activity data and other activity information, we can collect some picture of what their journey and experience with our brand has been like to this point, and we can use that for personalization. And you can also use what you know about similar people, or what you can learn about the individual that you have. And we'll kind of talk about how you can do that as well. So, assuming you have your segmentation kind of right, if you've seen that most of the group or most of the individuals in one segment interact in a certain way or prefer a certain message, it's reasonable to assume that someone else in that group is going to enjoy that message as well. So in terms of the how, we're going to kind of look at today building functionality sort of as a progressive enhancement to campaigns that otherwise might be relevant for the targeted audience that they've had. So the idea here is that you can build it to whatever degree you're comfortable with, and that they are sort of failing gracefully in some way. So where you might not have the data, or for an individual, the personalized campaign can still work and not have a sort of marketing emergency be caused, and that was an email on Twitter or something. I guess I would also sort of say here is that you shouldn't always try to do one-to-one marketing. Some of the best brands and stories and creative assets we've produced as a society have been completely all-encompassing human stories. And the kind of example I've seen talked about a lot there is Disney doesn't do any personalization, right? They have one movie for everyone, and every kid will watch Frozen for years to come. Quick overview of the tools we have available to us in Marketo for doing personalization. So obviously the two main channels for output in terms of Marketo is landing pages that we can generate, and the emails that we can create and send. We have person tokens, or lead or company tokens, being the ability to read some data off our lead or person record and place that into an email or into a landing page. We also have the ability to do that with program tokens. So we can take some information or data about the campaign that we're running, and we can insert that into the communication. We then have email scripting, which is this programming language that they've provided to us in the form of Velocity to be able to really tailor the message in a lot of creative ways. And I think a lot of what today is going to be about is email scripting. But that doesn't work on landing pages. That only works on emails. And then you also have Marketo's dynamic content creation tools, which are sort of segmenting parts of the email or parts of the landing page by the segment that someone's a member of. So if you created these segmentations in the Marketo environment, and you know that someone's a martech user versus being a martech decision maker, you might swap out the CTA at the bottom of an email to be either a sign-up link or a download a white paper link, depending on what you're trying to do. And there is also the Content AI tool. I don't know if anyone's used that a whole lot. It's sort of part of the website personalization tools. That is quite interesting. It is looking at similar users and what content they've been engaging with, and suggests content to each user as they're coming through. But that's kind of beyond the scope of today's chat. Let's get into it. I was going to say, so email scripting, I guess, can be split out a little bit further. So with email scripting, we can just be looking at the person's account fields that we had with our tokens, but we can combine that data in a few different ways and make decisions about showing one message versus another message. And we can also read information off any custom objects that we're building in Marketo or our opportunity records. So there is some sort of one-to-many type relations that we can start to reference in our email scripting to make decisions on and further personalize that message. And what we're also going to chat through today is creating sort of pseudo custom objects in the tool to be able to do that in a little bit easier format. And right at the end, we'll chat through how we can do some of this stuff in SMS with Marketo, including email scripting. So stay tuned for that. What do we need? Obviously, we're going to need some data. So I kind of want to just chat through quickly about how we might architect a Marketo instance to be able to provide good token data for personalization. So I'm sort of assuming that at the base level of our sort of data stack, if you will, we have our forms and our lead gen, all of our activity data coming in. This might be web activity, or this might be activity feeds from other tools coming in through an API. We've got obviously all of the data that would come from Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, or if you've got some other ERP integration, there'll be information you should be able to reference from that, as well as this other option of external enrichment. So tools like Clearbit or data.com being able to pull additional information about leads themselves or the company that they work for to further use that in the personalization that we can build. But generally, that sort of, I'm sort of saying input layer data isn't great to throw straight into an email. So you might have an internal system organized with your Salesforce team around how you code industry values. And that might work really great in the Salesforce dashboard, but the way you've written a certain industry, you would never want to put into an email, potentially. So what I'm kind of suggesting here is to think about how you can separate your targeting data from your input data, and also separate that from your presentation data, being the data that you're planning on showing to a user. This example of this might be something like not putting the actual first name field as the token email, and instead having something that can review what's been put into the first name field. So in the event that someone just puts like AAAA or a swear word or something like that, you could filter those values out and not send an email that says like, hi, something, right? And I think as well in that layer is all the content, so the stuff that we're building into the actual email assets themselves and into our program tokens. Then you obviously combine those three elements under this campaign execution layer. Obviously the trigger that's sending the email out, and the email itself, and the reporting and the experience that happens off the back of that to hopefully deliver this the right people, right message, right time goal. But to kind of simplify things today, the little experience that we're going to kind of work through is we have a site with a whole lot of content that people can download with various forms. The idea is that once someone requests that bit of content, we'll send them a little email, trigger off that form fill with a link to that asset. And then the idea is that they will get added to some sort of engagement program, and we'll continue that conversation over multiple touch points and multiple pieces of content. So what we're going to look at is just quickly how we can apply that kind of architecting concept and separating input and presentation data. So if we have our input layers, obviously all these form fields, we can combine that with, say, an enrichment webhook, something like data.com. We can combine that with lead dedupe to our existing database records, and maybe do some sort of lead to account conversion to make sure that we have the right account information for this person. Okay, and then obviously their activity data as well, that's all in our input layer. So then we might start building some processing campaigns. And bear with me if this is a little bit hard to read, but the idea is each of these white boxes is a smart campaign. So we're starting with a trigger of something like data value changes job title. If job title contains manager, then let's set a different field called seniority to manager, and so on and so forth to the different levels of seniority that we think are relevant for our business targeting. Something like data value changes job title, where the job function is marketing. So in this example, my job function field is something that's being populated by my enrichment API. But you could quite easily do that with another smart campaign that might look at job title contains marketing. Okay, so the job function is marketing. Then we can set a field we might call job collective to marketer. So now we have a field that we can insert into an email to really easily refer to that person as a group. without having to pull their actual job title into an email. Because you obviously know job titles vary wildly. Not everyone would want to see their long extended job title in an email. It might just be easy to be able to say, marketers like you, enjoy this, here it is. Another example here might be counting the number of times someone interacts with each of your product categories. So if you wanted to start doing sort of product category or product level scoring, being able to do that and then using a call to an external webhook or a webhook call to an external service to be able to work out what someone's main category is based off the scores of all their individual categories. So this is some examples of smart campaigns we can build into our processing layer, which we can then use to populate our targeting data and our presentation data. So the idea is that we have super nice, clean information in our targeting field that we can use to build smart lists really easily, and we can use further through email scripting to show one message or another. And then we have presentation data, which is stuff that we'll actually show to the user. And that's a little bit cleaner, hopefully. Cool. Another example of that might be starting to take that targeting data. Now that we've cleaned it up, now that we've got it in a way that we can understand easily, we can then build our segments on top of it. So in this example, if you're the manager, if you're a marketing manager at a fairly small company, or if you're a marketing specialist or coordinator at a mid-sized company, or the director of marketing at a startup-sized company, then we might say, okay, great, you're a martech user for us. So let's add you to our martech users segment, where you might have different other segments there. And let's also add you, in this example, to our engagement program for martech users. Cool. Are there any questions on sort of separating the input layer and presentation data? Is that kind of making sense? All right. So the example I wanted to kind of run through today is this autoresponder email. So we filled in this tips for marketers white paper form, and now we're receiving this email. It's personalized. We've got that first name in there. It's pretty cool. Mail merge has been a thing since 1990. Otherwise, this is a fairly generic email, quite obviously. So what we can start to do is talk about how we build that. There is some tokens in here. So we have some tokens coming from our program to input the type of asset that someone's downloaded and the title of that asset into our subject line and into the body. And that's cool because it means we only have one email asset to worry about now, and that asset can work for every bit of content that we have set up, which is great because we can then test different versions of that email fairly easily across all of the content downloads that are happening. And we've used those program tokens to input the image and the link and the label of the link, and that's great. So that's that kind of like one asset that might sit in Design Studio. You might set that up as a champion challenger and test some different versions of it. Maybe there's a better layout for this email. But ultimately, the information that's going into this is not very personalized. It's just a generic kind of response. And as I sort of said, mail merge is so 1990. We know that you can put a first name in an email. It's not fancy. What might we try here? So thinking back to my definitions before, we were talking about ascribing sort of personal qualities to something and then tailoring the experience based on either someone's needs or someone's preferences. So we're going to try and create that kind of like closer relationship here. Using information that they've given us, what we've seen them do, and kind of what similar people have done. And we're going to try and make them feel seen, start that kind of dialogue back and forth a little bit, and hopefully provide some extra value on top. So I sort of set out thinking about what I could do here, and I settled on these four things that we're going to work through as a group. We're going to talk about making all of your emails come from someone and providing a point of contact in the organization that someone can kind of lean on throughout their buying process. We're going to talk about referencing what's happened to date, and then working out how we can do some cool sort of tailoring of the experience from that point onwards. So on our first step of personifying, obviously we want to start doing some stuff with lead owner information. I don't necessarily think every person in your database needs to have a lead owner that is a salesperson that they can actually call. But what we can start to do is create a relationship with the brand otherwise. So under the assumption that you do have lead owners, we can go from here and say, okay, great, we've got our email. Let's put in a lead owner. Let's make all of our assets come from that lead owner. So by actually inserting that information into the sender inputs of the email, let's put the signature in. Let's start using some of those presentation tokens to kind of tailor the message a little bit. It's still ultimately the same message, but we might change around from marketers to designers or marketers to copywriters, and we can still deliver the same asset, and it feels a little bit closer. Sorry. And then obviously we can input tokens for all of the lead owner information as well. And the image, we can actually continue doing this token system. So the thing I've been trying here is getting a photo of everyone in the sales org and loading those into Marketo with a format of like salesperson or sales owner dash first name dash last name, and then being able to use those first name and last name tokens to load the correct photo for the correct rep. Yep. And then failing that, maybe we don't have a lead owner, maybe it's too early to assign someone to a lead owner, or maybe they are owned by a generic address or a generic sync user at the moment. So a great option there is to create some sort of personality that they can interact with, some sort of personality that the recipient feels like they're being talked to from and developing some relationship with. So I really encourage that kind of thinking here. If you can put a real person forward, great. If not, try creating some sort of mascot or something else to have the relationship with. Continuing on with tailoring, we want to try and reference what they've done to date. So what we want to understand is this an old lead that's coming back to our site to download more content? They might be, a lead early on in the buying cycle. There may be a customer that's reading more contact. Is there some way that we can start to collect that information and tailor the message that we send out based on it? Or is this someone that's downloading content for the first time? So how might we know that? We're going to do some email scripting with it, but what might we be able to put into that email script to make that decision? Sort of naively, the first option you might say is lead created date. We could look at, was the lead that's downloading this content created today? But that's not always going to be super reliable. It may be a lead that was created months ago from some import, from some scraping exercise that you weren't a part of, and now they're finally filled in a form for the first time. We could try to do it based off status, assuming that all of our lead status is being set correctly and our sales team is keeping those up to date all the time, which I've never had a whole lot of success with doing. Or we could try to look at things like past form fields. So maybe we could set some field on their record to say whether or not they're filled in a form before. But what we're kind of going to chat through now is it'd be great if we could actually just reference the history of their content downloads. So have we seen them download an asset off our site before, or is this the first asset they downloaded? So in order to get to that point, what we're going to talk about is something which I've seen called pseudo custom objects, in the sense that we're inputting a whole lot of data into a text area field, and we're doing that in a structured way that we can then read in our email script and make decisions based on it. So let's assume that we have the same form set up for all of our different content pieces. This piece today is tips to marketers. It's a white paper. It's part of a program where we have those tokens set. So that same token that we had at the subject line before and in the body of the email and the button of the email, those tokens are set for all of our content programs, and that's great. What we can then do is into that program, build a smart campaign, which triggers off filling in our content download form. And then what it's going to do is append to a text area field called downloads some text. In this example, the text is sort of in a JSON format. So JavaScript object notation, we can then use the remaining structure. So that text there will get converted to whatever the lead's previous downloads were, plus on the end of that, some braces, and inside of those braces, a name, which will be tips for marketing, a date, which will be the current date time, the type, which will be white paper, and the URL, which is our sidmug.com/images/tips JPEG. No, sorry, the resources tips. Yeah. Cool. So that will happen every time someone fills in this form. We'll add another download to our list of downloads. What can we do with that, though? Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do with smart lists with that information. Querying that data becomes quite difficult because it's just a blob of text to Marketo. But what we can do with the email script, sorry, what slide are we on now? Oh yeah, sorry, that information is being added to our presentation layer. What we can do then, and I don't have animation right now, but within an email script, I think it's, yeah, sorry. Within an email script, it's possible to read that downloads field and to add the few characters that we need to add to complete that string and be able to have our velocity script interpret it as a velocity map, which is kind of like an array, but it's an array of objects. And from that point on, we can do some interesting things. So the script at the top here first checks whether that field's empty or not. And if it's empty, it just sets it to a null value. That's kind of necessary for the whole script and the email to be able to approve and be validated. The scripts need to work when there's no data sent. Step 2 here is we're doing some of that cleanup. So a velocity map is going to start with n with the square brackets, and we need to add those in because we don't have that in our looping smart campaign, because we don't know when we run that campaign whether we are adding the first one or a second or third one. We just assume that there's nothing there and we're adding one item each time. And then we wrap the whole thing as a map in step 2 here. And then we also do some cleanup to get rid of one spare comma, which will exist with the nature of what I had in the previous slide. And then with this evaluate, so when we are here and we've set our content to content equals and then our big string, you can actually evaluate the content variable and have a Marketer's Guide to Email Scripting. And then we can do some really cool things with that. So, and apologies if I'm going over time, I feel like I'm going to be so an example of that might be checking the size. So once we get it in there, we can actually work out with email scripting how many items we have in that array or in that map. If there's only one, we can assume, okay, great, this is someone's first download. So let's output some text that kind of references the fact that this is the introductory experience for this user. It may not be the first experience we wanted for someone, right? It may be a user guide or something super specific, bottom of funnel, or even post-sale asset that they're downloading. But we can still kind of interject and say, hey, you're new here. Here's the thing you wanted. And maybe you say, check something else out. So in this example, you could throw in a link to more of your early stage assets because this is the first experience someone's had. And then otherwise, putting in some default message there. Does that kind of make sense? Cool. Going a little bit further through that, we might add another decision to our email script. So we're doing the exact same preparation at the start, building out our object, and then here we're checking, is there one item in it? Yeah, great. If there is one item, what is that item? So if we remember back, we had that type field that we're adding, and if the type is white paper, then great. We can say, hey, item number 1 is really cool. It's a great intro to doing marketing. Else, if the type is presentation, we have a different message. Right? So that might be the bottom of funnel asset presentation is great. It's great that someone's interested in using our tool, but we kind of want to direct them back up to the top of the funnel. And else, obviously, there's default messages that we can insert as well. So then this email script is just going to output a string, and we can put that string into our email. Sorry, I'm losing my mouse. Cool. So we put the string into the email, and then great. This is our, if we remember back to the object that we had before, this is my second content download. No, sorry, first. my first content download. And so we're saying, hey, great, Professor Reed, tips for marketers is a great way to do cool marketing. And we now reference something that's been happening. And we can kind of build on that over time, build some complexity in, and we can know that that little experience that we created in that script is running on every content download that we're having because we're using that one asset every time we have a content download. To kind of further tailor this, I have this idea of wanting to have some automated experience be the kind of concierge for the marketing team or the marketing hotel. So I had a thought about sort of, what does it concierges do, right? You walk into the hotel and they say, oh, great, Mr. So-and-so, you're back. We have some messages for you, or here's some additional information that you needed. I've got a great tip for a restaurant, all that kind of thing. So let's kind of work out how we might be able to do that. If we create another smart campaign, we're triggering off that content download again. We then might have a few different lists that can qualify someone for an additional message, right? So we're going to send them that email, but we also want to add a little something else to it. And we might be able to say there is, okay, well, this person is in our list for renewals in the next 30 days. We can check that and add and populate a field, which we'll call in-email alert, with some text and a URL and a level of alert. So great, renewals in 30 days, that can be a level 1, not too worried about that. They're not overdue or anything like that. The house is on fire. And we can add some text saying like your wife is called and maybe the link instead of this situation, it's not going to the billing page, it's a triple O link, so we should probably call them. But more importantly, in this smart campaign, because we're doing choice 1 first, this person was invited to the mug, but they haven't registered for it. So we've got a matter of critical importance, and the level is 3. So now I've got this little map. We kind of recognize this structure as well. It's similar to what we did before, but now there's only one item in it. So it's a little bit easier to deal with. We can then write a script that will load that in and allow us to refer to the text, the level, and the URL, and then output some HTML. So in this case, we're going to output a link that links to the URL that we were intending to link to, that mentions the text, and changes the background color based on the level of the alert. And we can add that as a separate token to, say, the top of the email, and maybe generate some sort of alert bar with a call to action there. So we're sending this notification out. It may be a nurturing email that we're sending, so we're sending an email every week. The person knows that the emails come in on like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, but we're able to insert a little something else into that depending on what else is going on with our relationship with that customer. Sorry. I guess sort of, what might go wrong with a lot of this sort of stuff. A big one here is going to be lead owners. So if someone doesn't have a lead owner, or if they're owned by the generic user, we need a way of inputting some different information. Tokens give you the ability to have a default value if there is no value there. But the challenge with that is there's kind of going to be quite often owners that we don't like, right? So owners that are important, like an integration user or some sort of triage inbound sales generic user. But we would never want to talk about that Salesforce user as being someone's point of contact. So we can kind of chat through about how email scripting can be used to populate different owner information in. So we can create a script that maybe has some generic owners that we don't want to use as personalization targets. So anything that's part of our sort of generic marketing user or generic Salesforce user, we don't want to use those. But we'll start out by doing a check. So if the lead owner email address in Marketo is empty, let's input our muggy character from before and their information. We can still send this email out, we can still put something in the signature, and we know that it's going to work fine. If the lead owner email address is in the list of generic owners that we also don't want to use, then we can also insert our default values. And there may be a better way to write that query. But we can then go on to say, otherwise, if we haven't not got a value and the value that we have is not one of our bad ones, then great. We can insert the existing owner email, owner phone, owner name, etc. And then we can build these kind of safe tokens instead of using the existing lead owner field, we can use this my, as in a script token that we created, my.safeowner first name. And we know that that's always going to populate something that marketing would be happy to put into the email. And then we can avoid the sort of from dev@sidmugs.com type email that would probably not look very good. But doing that every time for every campaign is a big pain. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do that on a per program basis anyway, because as you clone those out, you may want to make changes to that script. And if you then have to change it across 100 programs, your marketing ops person is going to have a terrible Friday. So what you can do then is put all of these tokens in folders above the programs that you have, because programs within folders inherit the tokens coming from above. So you can create this sort of safe owner and this in-email alert token well above the actual programs that are referencing those. Possibly you create one folder in marketing activities that has all of the global tokens, and then every program and every subfolder is underneath that. I've seen that done. Depending on how you're setting up stuff, you may do it differently. But the idea is that you can define those tokens once, and then that can lead to a more maintainable instance going forward. Maybe there's an additional sync user being created for a new tool. You need to add an email address to the invalid generic owners list. And you can do that in this one place rather than going through 100 programs trying to update some filter. Continuing on with this kind of like tailoring theme, being in the concierge, can we go a little bit further? So we're sending someone content, and we're sending someone potentially this autoresponder after they download the content. But we're kind of doing that because links get lost in emails and that sort of thing. We might be able to do something a little bit cleverer where each time we send out a piece of content, we can give that person access to all of their previous content, because we've just gone through this process of building out this list of content downloads that's happened. So what we could do there is, so obviously we're running Smart Campaign before. Every time they download something, we add a new item to the downloads list. From there, what we can do is actually create a personalized link and put that in the email that takes someone to something that would feel like a little microsite, where we can show them the 2 previous downloads they've had, or as many previous downloads as they've gone through. And if we're storing some additional information like the date on that object, on that pseudo object, we can then say when they last read it as well. So now, we've all been using Marketo for, I assume, a number of years. We've probably read a lot of marketing content. There's probably some stuff that we really, really enjoy, want to be able to share with colleagues. A lot of those like definitive guide type things. But getting access to them is kind of hard. So if you can give all your leads a personalized site, they can go and see everything that they've downloaded out of the plethora of assets on the Marketo blogs and different marketing lead gen pages. I think that's kind of a cool experience. So in order to be able to make that happen, what you can do is tokens work on landing pages. So we can pull that JSON token, the downloads token, into the landing page. And what I've done before is put it in its own script block and then write some other JavaScript that does the exact same, completing the map and interpreting it as a map that we did as the email script. But this is an example of how to do it in JavaScript. And then that will allow you to loop through the map and generate a card for each item in that list. But we sort of talked about SMS. How might we do that? Obviously, tailoring to preferences is really important. So we might have a form where someone can opt into email or SMS or request that stuff be sent through SMS. So what I've then done before is, rather than trying to use an SMS gateway directly through an API and have to input text into a webhook or input text into a field and put that into a webhook, ClickSend gives you the ability to send an email and have that delivered to an SMS number. The email has to go to the phone number at sms.clicksend.com. But what we can do is create really, really, really simple emails and quickly change someone's email address to their mobile at clicksend.com, send that off, and then change it back to their email address. And that will totally work and deliver an SMS. And because it's an SMS that actually came from a Marketo email, you get native click tracking. So that link that's put into our SMS is the exact same link that would have been put into the email to this person. And when they click that, you can then trigger off your Smart Campaign follow-up or reporting or whatever it is you do inside of Marketo. That kind of works like that. You can put all of your tokens or your email scripting. You can maybe play around with some dynamic content in an email, which is delivered as an SMS to your recipient's phone. And then if you really, really wanted to, you can use Zapier to pull those SMS replies in, inject those into Marketo, maybe in the form of a paid form submission or an otherwise API update, and then use Smart Campaigns to determine the next message to send and build a two-way chatbot of some sort. The great thing there being you can go really complex on the email scripting side in order to send the right reply back. Cool. So what have we done? We've set our Marketo instance up to kind of give us the right data to be able to do this personalization. We've looked at using lead and program tokens. We've created a few basic email scripts, and you guys get the slides afterwards if you want the actual code examples. We've built a pseudo custom object, which is kind of hacky, but it works, and it's pretty useful. And we've used that object to both change the email experience and develop a little personalized microsite. And we've implemented SMS delivery as a preference. Where to go from here? I'd suggest if this is a thing that's interesting to you, if you have a lot of content that you're trying to deliver, you're wanting to create a better experience around the content, give it a go, send a lot, build that object out for all of your records, have some record of who in that experience signs up versus doesn't sign up, and then let's talk about how we might interpret that big list of downloads and use that as inputs for some sort of next best content engine with machine learning, which I'd be very interested in doing. Wrapping up, get your segments right first, get your messages to those segments right, plan to have all of this kind of degrade gracefully, build in defaults, build in safe versions of tokens that you want to use, try to avoid having someone's inputs be directly spat back at them, because who knows what they'll put into a form. They may not even realize they've input the wrong value into the form, and to then email them, their name in all caps is going to be kind of annoying. Or at worst, you'll have a screenshot of your email on Twitter and people will laugh. So build on that complexity gradually. Don't jump straight ahead to the complex stuff. Start small, and more generally, kind of plan to collect more data than you'll need, I think. Cool. Sorry, went over time there.
Cool.